Okay, today we're going to discuss how you can actually get paid to lose weight. That's true. I mean, you can literally, what I'm going to show you today, if you'll follow what I'm going to tell you today, not only is it not going to cost you anything, you're actually going to get paid. And I will explain it at the end. Just so you know, the average female is about $120 is what they'll get paid, and the average male is about $150 to $160 per month. So stay tuned. But what we're going to discuss today is how or why we use the ketogenic diet or a modified ketogenic diet in our medical-based weight loss program. And why we think you should use it too, and why it also works so well and is so effective. The ketogenic diet, first of all, just to explain real quick what it is, if you don't know, is you're not really counting, we're not looking at calories necessarily, we're looking at grams or a percentage of your calories be divided into either carbohydrates, fats, or protein. And the traditional ketogenic diet is 5% carbohydrates, 25% protein, and 7% fat. Now, in our program, we adjust that a little bit. We actually lower the fat and raise the protein. But that's a traditional ketogenic diet. And today, it's a lot different than it was even a few years ago. There's almost no restrictions as far as there's tons of desserts, there's pastas, there's bread, there's pancakes, along with all the proteins you can eat. Most of the dairy, except for the ice cream, obviously, but like different cheeses and things like that, cream. Most low glycemic vegetables, low glycemic fruit. So it's not restrictive at all. But another reason we think it's so successful is all the benefits you get from it. And we have, as far as human history, the last 6,000 years, that is how we have lived most of our history up until 40, 50 years ago, when this mass production of food, and they started introducing highly processed foods, and then ultra processed food, which has no food ingredients whatsoever. Also back in the 80s, well, let me start here. If you noticed, if you go back and look at pictures, just do a Google search, look at beach, look at, just anybody. In the 80s, 70s, 60s, and on earlier, almost no one is overweight. It's rare to see someone who's overweight. And when I was a kid in the 80s, 5% of the population was obese. Well, now it's 43% of the population. When I was a kid, it was about 10% approximately that were overweight. Well, now it's 70%. And again, when I was a kid, and if you were a kid of the 80s, you probably heard, pinch an inch. Well, back then, if you could literally pinch an inch at your waistline, it was time to do something about it. So that's how rare it was. But what is different between then and now? Our human genetics haven't changed. What has changed? Well, what has changed is our food environment. And what I mean by that is, back prior to, I think, the 80s, the food pyramid was primarily, it was higher fat, protein, and a little bit lower carb. And when you make any type of food, as you know, is you get your flavor from the fat or the sugar. Well, what they decided to do, for some reason, is they started attacking fat. And we now know that all the accusations were not true. We know it through the research, but they had said that fat was bad for you. It was causing heart disease and strokes and heart attacks. Well, that was a lie. And that was started by the food companies, the food manufacturers. So what they did is they lowered the fat, so everything was low fat, and raised the sugar. And when that happened is when you started to see the obesity epidemic start to happen. And that is the biggest difference between now and 40 years ago and the rest of our human history, is the food environment. Our genetics have not changed. So it's what we're eating, what we have access to. And what do they know? What do the food manufacturers know about raising the carbohydrates? Well, they know that one, it doesn't fill you up, and two, that sugar is addictive. Now, I'll cover this in another video, but here's just some of the research. We try to back everything by research. Now, here's just one from the Addiction Center. 75% of Americans eat excess amounts of sugar, and many of whom could be classified as having sugar addiction. And what we know about sugar addiction now is that it is, and I have the studies right here to prove it, it's as addictive or more addictive than cocaine and other drugs. It lights up the dopamine system just like a drug does. The only difference is when you withdraw from it, it's not like you break out in sweats and, you don't have the same visible excessive, withdrawals like someone who's on drugs does. It's more subtle and hidden because it's more like the food cravings. The lethargy after you eat and you have that food crash, a little bit of moodiness, that getting hungry and the hunger pain, the depth of the hunger pain. Those are the withdrawal symptoms. Again, we discussed all that in another video. I just want to mention it here. There's a reason why they did it, because when you eat sugar, it's not filling whatsoever. It actually increases the ghrelin hormone, and the ghrelin hormone is your hunger hormone. So what happens when you eat carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates, it actually makes you more hungry because it increases that ghrelin hormone. That's why you can eat a whole bag of chips, and I have done it, and you're still hungry. But you eat a 12-ounce steak and you're full. There's a reason. It's not necessarily the calories, it's the way your body responds to the calories that you're taking in. And your body responds differently to protein, fat, and carbohydrates. A calorie is a calorie to a certain point, but when it comes to how your body responds to it, not every calorie is equal. Your body responds to it differently. So what does the simple carbohydrates do is they make you more hungry. It also lowers the satiety centers of your brain. So it makes you even more hungry. So why do they want you to be more hungry? To consume more food. That's why you'll get that's why, when we were kids, we'd eat maybe 2 or 3 meals a day. We didn't snack. We didn't eat at night. It was very rare unless it was like a movie night on a weekend. But now it's common to snack all day and all night. Why? Because you get hungry, you have those food cravings. And they even say in some of these studies that what's called emotional eating or the boredom eating is not actually you being bored or emotional. It's that fact that your body is craving it. It wants that dopamine hit. So it's making you hungry. It's giving you those cravings. It's giving you, you're moody, almost like a depression almost. Not quite depression. I'm not saying that. But you get almost depressed. So when you do eat, you feel better. I know personally I have experienced that myself. So that is why they changed the food pyramid, is so that you will buy more food and consume more food. And part of that is it caused the obesity epidemic and the epidemic in hypertension and type 2 diabetes and prediabetes and metabolic syndrome. So that's what's changed. It's not our genetics, it's our food that we have access to. And it also, the sugar makes it more palatable, it tastes better. So when you combine the fact that it tastes better, that the sugar makes you more hungry, it doesn't satisfy you, it's a perfect storm. So if you've been told in the past that you just don't have the willpower, you don't have the drive and ambition, you're just lazy, that's not true. And I'll be honest with you, I actually kind of felt that way in the past. I always felt like if it is to be, it's up to me. Well, after doing this research, my attitude and outlook on that has completely changed. Because I had personally, when I went back and thought about it, I've experienced it myself, and it is true. And that's one great thing about the ketogenic or modified ketogenic diet. You don't have all the issues. I'll explain that in just a minute. But if you failed at doing it before, you're not a failure. It wasn't you. It was the food environment that was a huge part of it. It's 75% of America is overeating the sugar because it's in everything. It's almost impossible unless you're eating whole foods not to eat sugar. And the vast majority of those are addicted to it. That means they have those withdrawals and they crave it. So let's kind of get back on course. I kind of got off on a tangent there. But why we use the ketogenic diet is because it does the opposite of all those. Most of the diet programs out there is you either counting points or you're buying their meals, they're prepackaged, you're taking shots or you're taking pills or you're getting lap band surgery or gastric bypass. And if you're thinking about doing either of those last two, don't do it. Well, that's not medical advice. I'm going to suggest try other things first before you go to that extreme. Because what you're going to find, if you do the research, is most people end up back where they started. Excuse me, I'm still getting on the flu. But the reason those fail is, one, the biggest reason they're not successful, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, the biggest reason is when people go on a calorie-restricted diet, they experience a lot of pain. And what is that pain? That pain of being hungry. And when you're still eating lots of carbs, those hunger cravings you can't go back and fill them. So you're suffering because you're hungry, you're moody, you're cranky, you don't have any energy. It sucks and it's rough. And so about 80% of the people who start those diets stop. They quit when it gets hard. When it doesn't take very long, typically a couple weeks, and they usually give it up. Another reason those things fail is because if you were to complete a program and you got down to your goal weight, what have you seen before? They just rebound, they yo-yo. It's a cycle. They lose the weight, they stop the program, they start gaining the weight back. And usually they'll gain the weight back and some, especially the older you get. And also for females, it's a little harder for them. So they typically will gain all the weight back and some. It's called the rebound effect. Well, why does that happen? Well, the reason that happens is because when you begin to restrict your calories and on the diet for an extended period of time, your metabolic rate will begin to adapt. It's called metabolic adaptation to the amount of calories that you're taking in, so that it protects itself. It doesn't want, the body doesn't want to die, so it's going to protect itself, slow down the metabolic rate, so it's not burning up so much food or fuel to conserve it. And what happens is it drops pretty quickly as soon as 2 or 3 weeks, but it recovers extremely slow. Take a look at the Biggest Loser study and the Women's Initiative. Those are just a couple off the top of my head, where in those cases, their metabolic rate never recovered. In the Biggest Loser study, there's a reason they haven't done a follow-up show is because all of them, except for I think one, gained all the way back. Some gained more. Then what they found out is that after 5 years, their metabolic rate was still 499 calories less than what it was when they started. So extreme calorie restriction can actually affect your metabolic rate permanently. Most people, it will recover. It recovers extremely slow, but some it doesn't. But what happens, the reason you gain the weight back is because by the time you hit your goal weight, you've restricted the calories, typically 500 calories a day at least, below what your maintenance was. And as you're losing weight, you have to continue to drop your calories, so your metabolic rate is continuing to drop. So when you hit your goal weight and you adjust your calorie intake to your new goal weight, it is still higher than your metabolic rate. So as you begin to eat for your new goal weight and your maintenance level, well, your metabolic rate hasn't recovered, so you start to add on weight. And it continues until your metabolic rate adjusts, but by then it's normally people put all the weight back on and some. So that is why those diets are almost designed to fail from the beginning. Because if you don't use your own body's mechanisms, systems against itself, and you don't maintain that metabolic rate, your body is going to shut down to preserve itself. And when you go back to eat normal, even at the lower calories, because your weight's lower, you're going to pile that weight back on. And you know what I'm telling you is the truth. We have research, and you have probably done it. I have done it, and you know hundreds of people have done it. It's a constant cycle. Lose the weight, gain it back. Lose the weight, gain it back. And those companies have access to the same research as we do. They know it doesn't work. They know it's going to fail long term. It may work temporarily, but long term it's going to fail. And it's all about the money. So another reason that when you restrict your calories for an extended period of time, you're losing weight. We now know that 40% of the weight loss comes from lean muscle mass. That's lean tissue like connective tissue, muscle, ligaments, tendons, things like that. Well, that's the exact, absolute worst thing you could do, because your metabolism is based on a large part of your muscle mass, your lean muscle tissue. So if at all costs you want to preserve your lean muscle mass, your lean muscle tissue, and just lose the fat. So you have all of those things fighting against you when you go on a standard diet. But what I'm about to share with you about the ketogenic diet does the complete opposite of all of that. And that's why people are so successful. The first thing about the ketogenic diet makes it so successful is, right off the bat, it's virtually painless because you don't get hungry. You don't go hungry. And we're going to explain why here in just a minute. And people are able to maintain it for a lifetime if they want to. Now, you don't have to. It depends on your metabolic flexibility. Once you hit your goal weight, we don't tell you have to stay on keto forever. It just depends on how your body responds to the macros like protein, fat, and carbohydrates, mostly carbohydrates. So, and we'll adjust that once you hit your goal weight to find out what your level is. So we use a modified keto in the beginning, but once you get down to your goal weight, you may not have to use that anymore. Me personally, that's what I do most of the time. But the reason it's so successful and people are able to complete it and stay on it and lose so much weight and it looks like it's effortless is because you can basically eat as many calories as you were before and still lose weight. Now, let me explain why. When you go into ketosis or you're on a ketogenic diet, your body goes into ketosis, which means it goes into fat burning stage. It starts burning fat for fuel and not glucose because you're not pouring more glucose into your system through carbohydrates. Well, when that happens, it's called a process called thermogenesis. It takes more energy to turn that fat into fuel than it does carbohydrates. So what happens? Your metabolic rate, and we have all the research here, this is a different pile of research, to show that on average, your metabolic rate increases 15 to 20% just by being in ketosis, going on a ketogenic diet. So what does that mean? For the average person also, they averaged all the participants, male and female, of all sizes and shapes and all weights, that the average person's metabolic rate increased 300 calories per day. So what does that mean for the average person? That means if you're eating your metabolic rate, the amount of calories that you need for your metabolic rate, but now you're ketogenic and your metabolic rate is actually increased through thermogenesis because it takes more fuel to burn that fat, turn that fat into fuel. Well, the average person means their average calorie intake can increase 300 calories. So their metabolic rate is increased 300 calories. Well, if they're eating the same amount of calories as they were before, which was maintenance, they're now in a 300 calorie a day deficit. So they begin to lose weight. Now, let's take another example like me. For me, it takes about 2,700 calories a day. We're going to say 2,500 just to keep it simple. Well, if mine increased 20%, instead of being 2,500 calories a day, my metabolic rate, because I'm now ketogenic, is now 3,000 calories a day. But I'm still only taking in 2,500 calories a day. So what does that mean? I'm in a calorie deficit of 500 calories a day, which means I'm going to lose a pound a week. And all I've done is change what I eat. That's it. I'm eating the same amount of calories. I'm not hungry. I'm not full. I'm full, and I'm losing weight. And I'm eating basically almost anything I want. So that is why it is so freaking successful, and it's so easy for people to get on it and lose weight. It's because when you become ketogenic, your metabolic rate increases, and it burns that fat off. It melts it off. Now, another big advantage of the ketogenic diet, besides increasing your metabolic rate, is it will actually lower your ghrelin hormone, which is the opposite of carbohydrates. So it lowers your ghrelin hormone, which means you don't get as hungry. You don't have those cravings, which means it's going to make it easier for you to make better choices. And actually, it's also helps you to very naturally reduce or restrict your calories without even thinking about it, because you're not hungry, you're just not eating, because it's an appetite suppressant. Now, the only negative thing about that with us is that we have to make sure the patients are still eating enough food. Primarily the protein, that's why we say we have a modified keto. Because if for some patients, they just don't have any hunger whatsoever, but we have to make sure they still eat the food, because we don't want them to restrict their calories for an extended period of time, because it'll affect the metabolic rate long term. So it's a natural appetite suppressant, which causes, in many cases, natural restriction or reduction in calories because they're just not hungry. Another big difference is the energy level goes through virtually every 100% of the patients. My energy level is through the roof. It's because you don't have the insulin spikes from the high amounts of carbohydrates. You don't have the crashes after lunch or after breakfast when you eat a lot of carbs and you crash an hour or so later. All that goes away. The mental clarity is unbelievable. It's almost like the sun is brighter. And I'm not trying to oversell this. I'm just telling you what people have said and what I've experienced. The short-term memory improves. The brain fog goes away. And one of the reasons for that is your brain prefers ketones, or your body being in ketosis and ketones for fuel, than it does glucose. It'll use either one, but it prefers and works more efficiently with ketones, which is produced when you're fat adapted. And we have another book about that, and we have another video about ketosis and all the details of that. But that's why it's so great for the brain and the energy. Secondly, it reduces chronic inflammation. So if you have, which I have had it in the past, just the chronic inflammation with, being sore, joint pain, arthritis pain. And everyone's different. Everyone has a different response because we're all biochemically different. So the results vary from person to person. This is not medical advice. But we see a lot of that pain kind of going away. It helps you recover faster and to heal faster. We just had a doctor we watched on a podcast that switched over. He just had surgery. He switched over to a ketogenic diet because he could heal faster. And he wasn't healing fast enough, or he didn't feel like he was. So he went on a ketogenic diet to help him heal quicker. They also use the ketogenic diet in combination with chemotherapy because the patients get better results and they don't get nearly as sick. They also use the ketogenic diet before insulin was invented to manage type 1 diabetics. So the ketogenic diet's got decades and decades and decades and decades of research on it. It's safe and it's effective. But it helps with recovery and healing and a lot of other health issues. For example, people or patients with PCOS see improvements. Irritable bowel syndrome, it allows the gut to heal. It can reverse type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. It also can reverse or improve hypertension. It helps with acne, epilepsy, MS, CMT. If you have a neurological type of neuropathy, if you have a neurological disease, a lot of times that's caused by inflammation of the myelin sheath. And it improves that, reduces that, so you see improvement. Fibromyalgia. It's just anytime autoimmune diseases and issues, great improvement in those just by being on a ketogenic diet. Mental health, it helps with recovery after brain injury. It helps with recovery after if you're recovering from addiction. It also helps with Alzheimer's and dementia, either prevent it or help it improve it. Because we know now that they say that dementia and Alzheimer's is now, they call it type 3 diabetes, which is what? Just the overconsumption of carbohydrates for an extended period of time. Well, you cut out the carbohydrates, that goes away. It helps with physical endurance. You're going to see more and more people who do long distance, running, cycling, anything long distance. They're switching over to the ketogenic diet because they're able to maintain their energy levels. They recover quicker, faster. And they are practically, from what we have seen, and I've seen in the studies, they feel it's almost like they didn't even run the race. And I'm not saying that it wasn't effort, they're not tired. I'm just saying when you're using carbohydrates, you're saying they're constantly eating throughout the entire run. They're pushing down glucose constantly. If somebody runs out of glucose, they're falling down, panic and passing out during the race because they've run out of glucose, but because their body can't convert to fat burning as quickly. Just so you know, real quick. When you go on ketosis, it's going to take about 3 to 4 days for your body to convert from burning glucose as a primary fuel source to fat. So if you run out of it, it can't quickly turn to it. But the opposite can happen. So if you're fat adapted and you're in ketosis, you can immediately turn into burning glucose. So that's why those people who do those long distance, athletic events are constantly pumping in those carbohydrates, and they carb up the night before because they're trying to fill up that fuel. But you can prevent all of that by just being in ketosis, and you have an almost unlimited access to fuel. Another big difference, and you need to go do the research on this yourself, is migraines. They've now discovered in a recent study that they believe now that migraines are caused by a high consumption of carbohydrates and sugars. In the study, they took the participants off of the carbohydrates, their migraines went away. They reintroduced the carbohydrates, the migraines come back. They took them back out and they went away. So if you're someone who experiences high migraines, this may be something that can help greatly with those, at least reduce them, reduce the effect of them, or completely eliminate them. But again, everyone's different. I'm just telling you what we see a lot in studies and what they've put out. So that is why we believe so much in the ketogenic diet, is because there's virtually painless. You have almost unlimited choices in foods. It lowers your hunger, so it's a natural appetite suppressant. Your energy levels go through the roof. It gets rid of chronic inflammation. It helps you heal faster. Helps with a lot of chronic diseases. And you lose weight, and you don't have to cut the calories, which is awesome. You get the best of all the worlds. And because you haven't ruined your metabolism, when you get down to the end and hit your weight loss goal, guess what? You don't pile the weight back on. It's unbelievable. That's why we use it. We believe in it so wholeheartedly, and why it's so successful. Now, how can you actually get paid to do this, to actually be on a ketogenic diet? Well, you're not actually going to get paid. You're going to save. And here's how. So, but actually saving, I guess, is like you're putting money back in your pocket that you would have spent otherwise. So I guess you are getting paid to actually be on this diet or to use this nutrition protocol. Because I don't really consider it a diet, because it's a whole food, natural way we used to eat for thousands of years. So how do you get paid? Well, I did a little bit of research and actually found that somebody had already done the research. And what they found is they went into the local grocery store and they bought 2,000 calories of ketogenic foods. And then they bought 2,000 calories of the standard most popular foods. It wasn't all chips. It wasn't the most expensive. It was pretty standard right across. They tried to be fair as possible. And what they found is when you buy ketogenic foods, you will save about 30% on your grocery bill. And that's for the same amount of calories. The only difference is the type of food that you buy. So the processed foods and ultra processed foods cost more than real food. So what that means to you is that if you're a female, you're going to save about $120 a month on your grocery bill, but you're going to eat the same amount of calories. And you get all the other benefits. If you're a male, you're going to save about $150 to $160 a month on your grocery bill just by switching to whole foods and switching to ketogenic type foods. That's how you get paid to actually lose weight. So none of this costs you anything. Do your little research. It's everywhere about keto. Go out to do a little bit of research. You can contact us. I've got a book. I can send you all the information, including food list, shopping list, substitution list, recipes, all about ketosis, all about keto. Just contact us. I'll send it to you. It's an ebook that I wrote a few months ago. But information's out there everywhere. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. And another big benefit is you're actually going to save money to do it. So if you have any questions about the ketogenic diet, feel free to give us a call, contact. There's just so much research out there. There's so much information on it. But this is a way that doesn't cost you anything to lose weight. You'll actually save money losing weight. So if you have any questions, let us know. If you want the ebook, let me know. We'll send it to you free of charge. Just hit us up, DM us, email us, call us. We're always here to help.